thank you for being a faithful listener to this podcast. If you enjoy my work, feel free to visit my website, wordsoftaoism.com, where you'll discover more free resources for meditation and learning. I wish you a peaceful and beautiful day. In our contemporary world, characterized by growing complexity, perpetual acceleration, and technical sophistication, simplicity often appears as an outdated notion, a form of intellectual or material indigence, even a renunciation of the possibilities offered by our civilization. We multiply means without questioning ends, accumulate possessions without experiencing satiety, complexify our systems until they become incomprehensible. Our era values incessant action, permanent transformation, systematic intervention. The Taoist wisdom of Wu Wei invites us to a radically different perspective. Simplicity is not impoverishment, but purification. Non-action is not passivity, but action attuned to the deep nature of things. The return to the essential is not regression, but ultimate accomplishment. The Tao Te Ching reminds us of this paradoxical truth. The Tao does not act, and yet nothing is left unaccomplished. This Wu Wei, literally non-action or non-intervention, constitutes perhaps the most profound and most misunderstood concept of Taoist thought. It is in no way inertia or indolence, but a quality of action that emerges spontaneously from our deep nature when it accords itself to the very movement of life. Like water that naturally flows from heights to low places, circumventing obstacles without apparent effort, our most powerful action is that which follows the lines of least resistance, which inscribes itself in the natural course of things, rather than opposing it head-on. This wisdom of non-action transforms our relationship to effort. Our culture glorifies struggle, perseverance in the face of adversity, conquest through will. Without denying the value of these qualities in certain contexts, Wu Wei reminds us that there exists a more subtle efficacy in action that accords with the intrinsic nature of situations. As Lao Tzu says, the sage accomplishes without acting, teaches without speaking. This efficacy without apparent effort is born precisely from our capacity to discern the potentialities inherent in each situation and to let them unfold with a minimum of intervention. This quality of attention constitutes the very essence of Wu Wei, not the tense voluntaristic attention that seeks to control, but the receptive attention that perceives what is and accords itself to it. This receptivity must not be confused with passivity. It implies a particular form of intelligence, the capacity to discern natural currents, lines of force, propitious moments. As the Tao Te Ching says, to know what is sufficient is to be rich. This inner richness is born precisely from our capacity to recognize the essential and to liberate ourselves from the superfluous that clutters our perception and our action. Wu Wei, in its essence, transcends the categories of acting and non-acting to lead us back to a more original truth, that of being which unfolds without intention, of presence which accomplishes without effort, of unity which reveals itself in the silence of oppositions. It is not merely a method or a posture toward the world, but a dissolution of the dualities that fragment our understanding of existence. The Tao, in its ineffable simplicity, invites us to recognize that the agitation of our desires, the tension of our wills, the heaviness of our concepts are only veils placed over the primal clarity of what is. This clarity, Wu Wei designates it as a return, not in the sense of a nostalgic retreat toward a bygone past, but as a plunge into the eternal present, where all things rest in their own mystery. To return to the root is to find rest, murmurs the Tao Te Ching. This rest is not the absence of movement, but the cessation of struggle against the current of life. It is the state where the mind, liberated from its own projections, discovers itself as a mirror of the world. Neither ahead nor behind, neither grasping nor pushing away, but simply there, in perfect coincidence with the instant. The paradox of Wu Wei resides in this. It teaches not how to do, but how to be. It calls not to conquer, but to welcome. Far from the heroic quest for a truth to possess or a goal to reach, it invites us to a radical humility, that of recognizing that truth is not acquired, that it unveils itself on its own when the ego ceases to obscure it. As Lao Tzu says, one who knows does not seek to know. One who seeks to know does not know. This non-knowledge is not ignorance, but abandonment of the intellect's pretensions to enclose the infinite in finite forms. It is the wisdom of emptiness, that emptiness which is not nothingness, but fullness, matrix of all possibility. In this perspective, Wu Wei becomes a meditation on true freedom, not freedom understood as the power to impose one's will upon the world, but that which is born from alignment with the spontaneous order of the cosmos. This freedom is not won by force. It is discovered in the transparency of being to itself. When the mind attaches neither to success nor to failure, neither to gain nor to loss, it opens to a fluidity where each act, each thought, each breath becomes the natural expression of the Tao. Like water that takes the shape of the vessel without ever losing its nature, the human being in Wu Wei acts without freezing in action, lives without enclosing themselves in life. The simplicity of Wu Wei is not a reduction, but a dilation of existence. It delivers us from the illusion that meaning must be constructed, that value must be added, that accomplishment must be pursued. Everything is already there, in the discrete brilliance of the instant, in the silent dance of opposites, in the immanent equilibrium of what is born and what fades. The sage, says Zhuangzi, strolls in mystery without seeking to pierce it. This stroll is not wandering but celebration of a reality that needs neither to be justified nor transformed to be fully sufficient. Thus Wu Wei brings us back to a fundamental question. What if the essential were not elsewhere but here? What if the path were not to be traveled but to be recognized? What if fullness resided not in the accumulation of experiences, but in the abandonment of the resistances that separate us from being? In this abandonment, there is neither loss nor renunciation, but a reunion with what in us has never been lost. The simplicity of being, the joy of existing, the evidence of the Tao. This essential simplicity touches all domains of our existence, in our relationship to material possessions first, where frantic accumulation gives way to just measure. As Lao Tzu observes, there's no greater misfortune than not knowing how to be sufficient unto oneself, no greater calamity than the desire to acquire. This sufficiency is not ascetic privation, but lucid recognition of what is truly necessary to us. The material simplicity that follows is not suffered poverty, but chosen liberation from the burden of superfluous possessions that end up possessing us. This simplification extends equally to our inner life, so often cluttered with parasitic thoughts, artificial preoccupations, conditioned emotions. Wu Wei invites us to this purification of consciousness that lets our fundamental nature emerge from beneath the layers of acquired identifications. As Zhuangzi says, the mind of the perfect sage is like a mirror. It retains nothing, refuses nothing. It receives, but does not conserve. This quality of presence without attachment perhaps constitutes the very essence of inner simplicity, that state where our perceptions, our thoughts, and our actions emerge spontaneously in response to situations, without the distorting filter of our projections and our fears. Our relationship to time transforms in the light of Wu Wei. Contemporary culture pushes us toward ever tighter management, ever more precise planning, constant optimization of each instant. This voluntaristic approach paradoxically engenders a sensation of perpetual acceleration and chronic lack of time. Taoist wisdom invites us to rediscover natural organic time, which is not a scarce resource to exploit, but the living medium of our unfolding. As Lao Tzu says, nature is not in a hurry, yet everything is accomplished. This confident patience allows us to perceive propitious moments, the seasons favorable to each undertaking, and to act with an efficacy that seems miraculous precisely because it inscribes itself in the natural course of things. This temporal simplicity manifests in our capacity to fully inhabit the present instant, liberated from nostalgia for the past as from anxiety about the future. As the Tao Te Ching expresses, one who stands on tiptoe does not stand for long. This evocative image reminds us that anxious projection toward the future unbalances us, while rootedness in the present stabilizes us and allows us to perceive the opportunities offering themselves to us. Wu Wei is not a renunciation of future action, but recognition that the most effective action always emerges from full presence to the current instant. Our relationship to speech also transforms under the influence of Wu Wei. Our culture values eloquence, the capacity to convince, to impress through discourse. Without denying the value of clear communication, Taoist wisdom reminds us of the power of silence and measured speech. As Lao Tzu affirms, one who knows does not speak, one who speaks does not know. This verbal economy is not refusal to communicate, but recognition that the most essential words emerge from an inner space of silence, that the deepest truth is often transmitted beyond explicit formulations. This verbal sobriety also expresses itself in our capacity to liberate ourselves from unnecessary abstractions, from conceptual complications that obscure rather than clarify. As Zhuangzi says, a frog at the bottom of a well cannot conceive of the ocean. This epistemological humility invites us to recognize the limits of our intellectual constructions and to privilege direct experience, the immediate perception of what is. The conceptual simplicity that results is not intellectual poverty, but lucidity about the fundamentally mysterious and irreducible nature of existence. Wu Wei also transforms our relationship to learning and mastery. Our culture values the systematic acquisition of knowledge, the accumulation of diplomas, the visible demonstration of competencies. Without denying the value of study, Taoist wisdom invites us to a more organic form of learning, where conscious technique progressively gives way to an educated spontaneity. As the parable of the Zen archer illustrates, when the archer is without desire for success, they have all their skill. This paradoxical mastery is not created but born from patient practice that progressively transforms our very nature, until right action emerges without conscious deliberation. This transformation of our relationship to learning expresses itself in the famous Taoist parable of the centipede, who can no longer walk when it becomes conscious of the complex coordination of its 100 legs. This story illustrates the limits of reflexive consciousness and the necessity of transcending conscious technique to access true mastery. As Zhuangzi says, the highest form of person uses their heart like a mirror. They neither precede nor follow, they respond without storing. This immediate response, unfiltered by conscious deliberation, perhaps constitutes the very essence of Wu Wei as action perfectly attuned to the situation. Our relationship to wisdom itself is transfigured by Wu Wei. Our intellectual culture often values erudition, the accumulation of knowledge, conceptual sophistication. Without denying the value of study, Taoist wisdom invites us to rediscover that natural intelligence, that direct understanding which precedes discursive thought. As Lao Tzu says, without leaving their door, one can know the world. Without looking through their window, one can see the Tao of heaven. This intuitive wisdom, which perceives the essence of things beyond appearances, perhaps constitutes the highest form of Wu Wei as non-acting knowledge. Our culture celebrates visible success, concrete achievements, goals attained. Without denying the legitimate satisfaction these accomplishments provide, Taoist wisdom invites us to a more subtle form of flourishing. Not that which results from the accumulation of experience or achievement, but that which emerges from our capacity to be fully present to what is. As the Tao Te Ching says, one who stands on tiptoe is not stable. One who lengthens their stride does not go far. This critique of excessive efforts reminds us that true accomplishment is not external conquest, but inner harmony. This conception of realization expresses itself in the Taoist ideal of the sage who acts without acting, accomplishes without attaching to accomplishment. This absence of identification with our actions and their results does not diminish their efficacy, but purifies it of the egoic motivations that so often limit it. As Zhuangzi says, heaven and earth possess great beauty, but do not speak of it. The four seasons follow a clear law, but do not discuss it. All things have their own principle, but do not explain it. This silent efficacy, this perfection that does not proclaim itself, this excellence that does not compare itself, perfectly embodies the paradoxical simplicity of Wu Wei. This wisdom invites us to rediscover that quality of being which precedes our professional, social, or ideological identifications, that simple and direct presence which constitutes our fundamental nature. As the Tao Te Ching says, return to simplicity, hold to authenticity, reduce selfishness, diminish desires. This return is not retreat, but accomplishment, not loss, but reunion with what we have in truth never ceased to be, beneath the layers of acquired conditioning, in the fabric of our modern lives, where each moment seems to require optimization, measurement, justification. Wu Wei invites us to rediscover the art of action without intention, the beauty of the gesture that is sufficient unto itself. This practice requires neither temple nor a grandiose ritual. It is embodied in the humblest details of our daily life, where receptive attention can transform the ordinary into a silent celebration of the Tao. To cultivate Wu Wei is to learn to fully inhabit each act, to let each instant reveal its own fullness without bending it to an external purpose. Consider, for example, the act of walking. In our haste, we often transform walking into a simple means of transport, a mechanical transition between 2 points. Wu Wei invites us to walk otherwise, not toward a pressing destination, but with an entire presence to each step. Feel the contact of the ground beneath your feet, the light swing of your arms, the breath that rhythms your movement. Do not seek to accelerate or slow down. Let the body find its own tempo, its own harmony with the pulse of the earth. In this effortless walking, each step becomes an encounter with the instant, a dance with the world. Similarly, cooking can become a Wu Wei meditation. Peeling a carrot, chopping an herb, stirring a soup. These gestures, so often relegated to the rank of chores, contain an unsuspected depth. While peeling, the sage does not think of the soup to come, but immerses themselves in the gesture, letting each movement reveal its own perfection. The blade glides, the skin detaches, the raw perfume of earth rises. Nothing more is required than this gentle attention, this receptivity to textures, sounds, smells. The final dish is no longer a goal to reach, but a natural consequence of a presence attuned to the act. Listening to music offers another door toward Wu Wei. Rather than consuming a piece in the background, distracted by 1,000 thoughts, try to sit and let the notes pass through you. Do not anticipate the refrain. Do not judge the melody. Let each sound emerge and fade like a wave on the shore. Your mind, liberated from the desire to comment or control, becomes a space where music unfolds freely, revealing nuances that the hurried ear never hears. This listening without grasping is a form of non-action. You add nothing, retain nothing, and yet everything is there. Writing, too, can embody Wu Wei. Too often we approach writing with a tense intention, to produce a perfect text, to convince, to impress. But imagine a writing that surges like a spring without forcing words to bend to a preconceived form. Hold the pen or place your fingers on the keyboard and let thoughts form of themselves, like clouds taking shape in a clear sky. Do not correct immediately. Do not judge. Let the hand follow the thread of the mind, confident that what must be said will find its way. This fluid writing, without resistance, is an offering to the Tao, a mirror of the spontaneous impulse of life. These simple gestures, walking, cooking, listening, writing, become contemplative practices when they're imbued with the spirit of Wu Wei. But beyond these acts, Taoism proposes more explicit disciplines to anchor this wisdom in body and mind. Among them, meditative walking is a privileged path. Choose a calm place, a garden, a park, a forest path, and advance slowly, deliberately, synchronizing your breath with your steps. With each inhalation, feel the air entering. With each exhalation, let tensions dissolve. Observe the details around you, light filtering through leaves, birdsong, the texture of the ground. This walking has no goal. It is a return to being, a celebration of movement as expression of the Tao. Qigong, that Taoist practice of breath and movement, is another incarnation of Wu Wei. These slow, fluid gestures, inspired by natural elements, water, wind, tree, do not seek to dominate the body, but to attune it to the vital energy of the cosmos. In practicing Qigong, you do not force breath to obey. You let it circulate freely, like a breeze finding its way through a valley. Each posture, each transition becomes a meditation in movement, a silent dialogue with the universe. The body, liberated from the tensions of will, rediscovers its own intelligence, that which precedes conscious thought. An even more accessible practice consists of simply observing nature. Sit near a tree, a river, or even a potted plant, and bring your attention to what is there. Note the trembling of leaves, the murmur of water, the slow pulsation of life. Do not seek to name or analyze. Let your gaze settle gently, like a feather falling on grass. This observation is not passive. It is an active communion with the world, a recognition that you are part of this flux without beginning or end. In this instant of pure presence, the mind calms, and Wu Wei reveals itself as the natural state of being. These practices, whether daily or contemplative, share a common thread. They bring us back to receptive attention, that quality of listening which perceives without grasping, which acts without forcing. Wu Wei does not ask us to abandon everything to live as hermits. It invites us to transform our way of inhabiting the world, here and now. In walking, in cooking, in listening, in writing, in breathing, we can let fall the veils of urgency and control to rediscover the simplicity of being. As the Tao Te Ching says, in clarity one rests, in rest one clarifies. This rest is not immobility, but a plunge into the eternal present, where each gesture, each breath, each glance becomes an echo of the Tao. Thus Wu Wei teaches us that practice is not an effort to add to our already burdened lives, but a joyful subtraction of what encumbers us. By stripping ourselves of the habit of wanting to direct everything, we let life unfold through us, fluid and free, like a melody that needs no conductor to resound. And in this fluidity, we discover that the essential is never elsewhere. It is there in the discrete perfection of the instant, in the endless dance of the world offering itself to those who simply know how to be.